Stop lying to yourself. That person who made you angry this morning didn't make you anything. You were already angry. They just gave you an excuse to let it out. We love playing victim because it absolves us of responsibility. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to hear. Every single time you blame someone else for your emotions, you're admitting you're weak. You're announcing to the world that strangers have more control over your internal state than you do. A random person who doesn't know your name, doesn't pay your bills, doesn't sleep in your house, somehow has the remote control to your peace, and you handed it to them willingly. That's not their fault. That's yours. And until you accept that, until you stop waiting for the world to treat you better before you can feel better, you'll stay exactly where you are, powerless, reactive, and completely at the mercy of everyone else's behavior. You know what fascinates me most about human beings? It's not our ability to build skyscrapers or send rockets to space. It's our peculiar habit of handing over the remote control of our emotions to complete strangers. We wake up in the morning perfectly fine, and then someone cuts us off in traffic, says something sideways at work, posts something ridiculous on social media, and suddenly our entire day is ruined. We've given a person who doesn't even know our middle name the power to determine whether we have peace or chaos inside our souls. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. Here's what nobody wants to admit, but everybody experiences. Anger is never really about the other person. Never. I don't care how rude they were, how disrespectful they acted, how deliberately they tried to provoke you. The anger you feel, the disturbance in your spirit, the agitation in your mind, that belongs to you. It's yours. You manufactured it in the factory of your own consciousness. And if you manufactured it, that means you have the power to stop manufacturing it. But we don't want to hear that, do we? Because it's so much easier to say they made me angry than to say I chose to become angry. One makes us a victim. The other makes us responsible. One lets us off the hook. The other demands we grow up. One allows us to stay exactly where we are. The other requires transformation. And transformation, real transformation, is uncomfortable work. Now listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because this single principle will change everything if you really grasp it. Every single time you become angry or bothered by another human being, what's actually happening is this: they have exposed something in you that was already there. They didn't put it there. They just revealed it. They're like a doctor pressing on your body looking for the injury. When he presses and you scream, you don't blame the doctor for the pain. The pain was already there. He just found it. That person who made you angry just pressed on an unhealed place in your soul, an immature place in your character, an undeveloped place in your emotional intelligence. Think about water in a glass. If I bump into you and you're carrying a glass of water, what spills out? Water, obviously. But why does water spill out? Because that's what was in the glass. If orange juice was in the glass, orange juice would spill. If poison was in the glass, poison would spill. So when life bumps into you, when people collide with your day, when circumstances press against your composure, what spills out of you is simply what was already inside you. The person didn't create your anger, they just revealed it. This is why the same situation can happen to 10 different people and you'll get 10 different reactions. One person laughs it off. Another person stews about it for days. Another person plots revenge. Another person doesn't even notice. Why? Same situation, different reactions. Because the situation isn't the problem. The internal condition is what determines the response, you see. Most of us are walking around with emotional bank accounts that are overdrawn. We're stressed, we're tired, we're carrying wounds from yesterday, we're anxious about tomorrow, we're disappointed about what didn't happen, we're bitter about what did happen. And then someone does something small, something minor, something that on a good day wouldn't even register, and we explode. But we blame them. Look what you made me do. No, look what was already in you waiting to come out. Here's the truth that will set you free. Nobody can make you feel anything without your permission. Read that again. Nobody can make you feel anything without your permission. They can say words, they can do actions, they can have opinions, but the meaning you assign to those words the importance you give to those actions, the weight you place on those opinions, that's your choice. That's your power. And most of us have been giving that power away our entire lives without even realizing we had it. You want to know why you can't stop being angry at people? Because you haven't accepted responsibility for your emotional state. You're still operating from the victim mentality that says external circumstances determine internal conditions. But that's a lie. That's slavery. That's bondage. And you were not created to live in bondage to anyone's behavior, anyone's words, anyone's attitude. The moment you understand that your peace is your responsibility, everything changes. Not their responsibility to stop being annoying, not the world's responsibility to treat you better, not life's responsibility to be fair. Your responsibility, your peace, your joy, your emotional stability, that's on you. And yes, that's heavy. That's a weight, but it's also the most liberating truth you'll ever encounter, because it means you're not stuck waiting for everyone else to change before you can have peace. You can have it right now, today, this moment. But here's where most people get confused. They think taking responsibility for their emotions means accepting mistreatment. No. You can have boundaries and peace at the same time. You can remove toxic people from your life and still not be angry at them. You can disagree with someone and not be disturbed. You can stand up for yourself and maintain your composure, in fact. You're more effective at all of those things when you're operating from peace rather than reaction, from clarity rather than emotion, from strength rather than anger. What I'm telling you is that there's a way to move through this world untouchable. Not isolated, not cold, not disconnected, but untouchable in your spirit, unshakable in your core, unmoved by the chaos that moves everyone else. And it starts with understanding one fundamental principle. You are the only person responsible for what happens inside of you. Let me tell you about something that happened in a small coastal village where fishing was the primary livelihood. There was a fisherman named Tariq who had been fishing those waters for 20 years. Tariq was known throughout the village not for the size of his catch, but for his temper. Every single day, without fail, Tariq would return to shore angry about something. The weather wasn't cooperating. Another fisherman crossed his path, the nets got tangled, the fish went biting. The buyer offered too little. It was always something. His wife would see him coming from a distance and already know, here comes the storm. One season, an older fisherman named Kareem moved to the village. Kareem was different. He fished the same waters, faced the same weather, dealt with the same buyers, but he always came back with this calm about him. Tariq noticed this, and it actually made him more angry. How dare this old man have peace when there was so much to be upset about? One evening, Tariq couldn't take it anymore. He confronted Kareem at the dock. What's your secret? Why don't these things bother you like they bother everyone else? Kareem looked at him with eyes that had seen many years and said something Tariq never forgot. Young man, every morning before I take my boat out, I check my nets for holes. If I find a hole, I mend it. But you spend your time checking everyone else's nets, everyone else's boats, everyone else's business, and you never mend the holes in your own net. So everything leaks out. Your peace leaks out. Your joy leaks out. And you wonder why you come back empty even when your boat is full. That story illustrates something profound about why we stay angry and bothered. We're so busy monitoring everyone else's behavior that we never examine our own internal structure. We never ask ourselves why certain things trigger us. We never investigate why we have holes in our emotional nets. We just keep going out into the waters of life, encountering the same situations, having the same reactions, and wondering why nothing changes. Here's what most people don't understand about anger and being bothered. It operates on a permission system. But the permission isn't coming from the other person. It's coming from you. You've given yourself permission to be affected. You've told yourself a story that says, when this happens, I should feel this way. And you've repeated that story so many times that now it runs automatically. You don't even question it anymore. There are invisible agreements we make with ourselves about how we're supposed to respond to life. The first agreement is this: I agree to let other people's energy affect my energy. Someone walks into the room in a bad mood, and we think we have to absorb that mood. Someone speaks to us harshly, and we think we have to match that harshness. Someone disrespects us, and we think we have to feel disrespected. But these are agreements, not laws. You can revoke them anytime you want. The second invisible agreement we make is that our value is determined by how others treat us. This is a trap. When someone treats you poorly and you get angry, what you're really saying is, they have the authority to determine my worth. You've handed them the gavel. You've made them the judge, and now you're sitting in their courtroom waiting for a verdict. But why are they the judge? Who appointed them? You did. And you can fire them just as quickly. The third agreement, and this is the most dangerous one, is that offense is something we must take. Society teaches us that when someone offends, we are obligated to be offended. But offense is not something that's given. It's something that's taken. Think about that word. I took offense. You took it. That means it was a choice. You reached out and grabbed it. You could have just as easily left it there. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Your brain is built for efficiency. It doesn't want to process every situation from scratch, so it creates patterns, shortcuts, automatic responses. This is useful when you're learning to drive or tie your shoes, but it's destructive when you're dealing with emotions. Because what happens is, the first time someone speaks to you a certain way and you get angry, your brain creates a pathway. The second time it happens, that pathway gets stronger. The third time, stronger still. And after years of this, the pathway becomes a highway. Now, the anger comes before you even consciously think about it. The person says the thing, and boom, you're already angry. You didn't choose it in that moment. You chose it years ago when you allowed the pattern to form. This is why the same type of person keeps bothering you. It's not that the universe keeps sending you difficult people. It's that you have a pattern that recognizes and responds to certain behaviors. You've trained yourself to be triggered by specific things. And until you interrupt that pattern, until you create new pathways, you'll keep having the same reactions. But here's the hope in all of this. If you built those pathways, you can build new ones. If you trained yourself to react, you can train yourself not to react. It's not easy, it's not quick, but it's absolutely possible. The first step is recognizing that you're not a victim of your emotions, you're the creator of them. Every feeling you have is generated by a thought you think. And you have the power to think different thoughts when someone does something that would normally make you angry. There's a gap between the action and your reaction. It's a tiny gap, maybe a fraction of a second, but it's there. In that gap lives your power. In that gap, you can choose. Most people blow right past that gap. They go from stimulus to response without any awareness. But when you slow down, when you become conscious, you start to see the gap. And when you see it, you can use it. There was a woman named Layla who worked at a busy hospital as a nurse. Every day she dealt with difficult patients, demanding doctors, exhausted colleagues, and life and death situations. The stress was enormous. Most nurses in her unit burned out within 3 years. Some became bitter, some became numb, some just quit. But Layla had been there for 15 years and somehow maintained this presence that people couldn't explain. Patients requested her specifically. New nurses wanted to shadow her. Even the most difficult doctors seemed to calm down around her. One day, a new nurse named Zara asked her directly, "How do you do it? How do you stay so calm when everything around us is chaos? Don't you ever want to snap at someone? Don't these people get under your skin?" Layla smiled and said, "Come with me." She took Zara to the roof of the hospital where you could see the entire city. She pointed to a building in the distance. You see that building? 5 years ago, my daughter was in a car accident. She was in a coma for 3 weeks. In this very hospital, I stood in that hallway outside the intensive care unit, and I made a decision. I decided that if she lived, I would never again waste my emotional energy on things that don't matter. I would never again let someone's bad day become my bad day. I would never again give my peace away to people who don't even know they are taking it. She paused and looked at Zara. My daughter lived, and I kept my promise. Now, when a patient is rude to me, I see a person in pain. When a doctor is sharp with me, I see someone carrying too much weight. When a colleague is short-tempered, I see someone who's tired. I stopped taking things personally because I realized nothing is actually personal. People are just responding to their own internal weather, and I refuse to let their storm become mine. That's the shift. That's the transformation. When you stop interpreting other people's behavior as being about you, you stop being bothered by it. Most of the things that make us angry have nothing to do with us. We just think they do. Someone doesn't greet you in the morning, and you spend all day upset, but maybe they just got terrible news. Maybe they're battling depression. Maybe they didn't even see you. You created an entire narrative where you're the victim of their disrespect, but you were never in their story at all. Here's a principle that will revolutionize your relationships. Hurt people hurt people. Read that until it sinks in. Hurt people hurt people. When someone lashes out at you, they're not operating from their best self. They're operating from their wound. And wounded people wound people. It's not right. It's not acceptable. But it's understandable. And understanding doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It means seeing clearly so you can respond wisely instead of reacting emotionally. You know what changed everything for me? When I stopped seeing people's behavior and started seeing people's pain. When someone criticizes you harshly, they're usually projecting their own insecurities. When someone tries to control you, they're usually afraid of being out of control in their own life. When someone gossips about you, they're usually trying to feel significant because they feel small. Once you see this, once you really see this, it's hard to stay angry. You might feel sad for them. You might set boundaries with them. But anger loses its grip. Now let me give you something practical, something you can use today. There's a separation you need to make between the person and their behavior. The person is not their behavior. I'll say it again. The person is not their behavior. When you collapse these two things together, you get stuck in anger. When you separate them, you find freedom. Someone does something wrong, but that doesn't make them wrong. Someone says something hurtful, but that doesn't make them a hurtful person. They're a person who in that moment did a hurtful thing. This distinction matters when you see the person separate from the behavior. You can address the behavior without attacking the person. You can have a boundary without having bitterness. You can say, that's not acceptable without saying you're not acceptable. This is maturity. This is emotional intelligence. This is how you maintain your peace while still standing up for yourself. But here's the part that requires real courage. Taking full responsibility for your emotional state means giving up the luxury of blame. Blame feels good in the moment. It feels righteous. It feels justified. But blame is expensive. The cost is your power. Every time you blame someone else for how you feel, you give them power over how you feel. You make them the boss of your inner world. And as long as they're the boss, you're the employee. You're at their mercy. You're waiting for them to change so you can feel better. That's a terrible place to live, I'm telling you. The day you stop waiting for people to change before you can have peace is the day you actually get peace. Because peace isn't the absence of difficult people. Peace is the presence of a disciplined mind. Peace is a choice you make every single morning when you wake up. You decide, today I will not give my power away. Today I will not be moved by people who don't know where they're going. Today I will respond from my center, not from my wounds. This doesn't happen overnight. You don't just decide once and it's done. You decide every day, every hour, every moment. Someone cuts you off in traffic, you decide. Someone sends a nasty email, you decide. Someone talks behind your back, you decide. Each decision builds emotional muscle. Each time you choose peace over reaction, you get stronger. And eventually, what used to shake you, not because you're cold, not because you don't care, but because you've built something inside yourself that's stronger than the chaos outside yourself. There's a lighthouse that stands on the edge of a rocky coast where the Atlantic Ocean meets the shore with relentless force. This lighthouse has stood there for over 100 years. Every single day, waves crash against its foundation. Storms beat against its walls. Winds try to knock it down. Ships have wrecked all around it. The sea has claimed countless vessels in those waters, but the lighthouse still stands, not because it fights the ocean, not because it argues with the wind, not because it complains about the storms. It stands because it was built for this. Its foundation goes deep. Its structure is solid. And it has one job: keep the light burning no matter what's happening around it. The keeper of that lighthouse, an old man who had maintained it for 30 years, once said something remarkable to a journalist who asked him how he dealt with the isolation and the constant battling of the elements. He said, "I don't battle anything. The ocean does what the ocean does. The wind does what the wind does. Storms come and storms go. My job isn't to control any of that. My job is to keep the light burning. So that's what I focus on every single day. I check the light. I clean the lens. I maintain the fuel. I make sure when ships are out there in the darkness, they have something to guide them. The chaos around me has nothing to do with the clarity of my purpose." That's the secret. That's what most people miss. You can't control the ocean. You can't control other people. You can't control circumstances, but you can absolutely control whether your light stays on. You can control your focus. You can control your response. You can control what you feed your mind and your spirit. And when you make that your focus, when you stop trying to calm the ocean and start maintaining your light, everything changes. Now here's what this looks like practically in your daily life. You wake up in the morning, and before you check your phone, before you see what chaos the world has created overnight, before you read the messages or the news or the emails, you establish your center. This might be 5 minutes of silence. This might be declaring something true about yourself. This might be setting an intention for how you will respond to whatever comes. But you do something that reminds you who you are before the world tells you who you should be. Because here's what happens if you don't do this. You wake up reactive. You're immediately responding to everyone else's agenda. Someone sends you something negative, and now you're negative. Someone has a problem, and now you have a problem. Someone is anxious, and now you're anxious. You're just absorbing whatever energy comes at you. But when you establish your center first thing in the morning, when you remind yourself of your foundation, you become like that lighthouse. Things can crash all around you, but you remain stable throughout your day. You're going to encounter people and situations that used to trigger you. This is guaranteed. But now you have a different approach. Instead of immediately reacting, you create a pause. In that pause, you ask yourself a simple question. Is this worth my peace? Not, am I right to be angry? Not, don't I have a right to be upset? But is this worth my peace? Because the answer is almost always no. That rude comment, that passive-aggressive email, that person who didn't acknowledge you, none of it is worth your peace. None of it is worth giving away the stability you've built. You also start building what I call emotional reserves. Just like you have financial reserves for emergencies, you need emotional reserves for difficult moments. How do you build them? Through consistent deposits. Every time you choose peace over reaction, that's a deposit. Every time you see someone's pain instead of just their behavior, that's a deposit. And when you have reserves, when someone tries to withdraw from your account with their negativity, you have plenty to spare. You don't go bankrupt emotionally because one person had a bad day. Here's something else that matters. The people you surround yourself with will either support your peace or sabotage it. You need to be intentional about this. I'm not saying cut off everyone who's going through something difficult. I'm saying be aware of people who are committed to chaos, people who are addicted to drama, people who don't want solutions, they just want to complain. These people will drain your reserves faster than you can build them. You can love them from a distance. You can pray for them. You can wish them well. But you don't have to give them unlimited access to your peace. And understand this clearly. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It's necessary. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot help others if you're emotionally bankrupt. You cannot be a light for anyone if your own light is flickering. So you guard your peace like you guard your health. You make decisions that support it. You remove things that threaten it. You build habits that strengthen it. You build habits that strengthen it. Now, after all of this, after you've done the inner work, after you've built new patterns, after you've established your center, something remarkable happens. You start moving through the world differently. People notice it. They can't quite explain it, but they feel it. You have this quality about you that's both strong and gentle. You're not easily shaken, but you're not hard. You're not reactive, but you're not passive. You're present, but you're not affected. You've become the lighthouse. And here's the beautiful thing. When you stop being bothered by people, when you stop giving your power away, when you maintain your peace regardless of circumstances, you actually become more effective in everything you do. You make better decisions because you're not deciding from anger. You build better relationships because you're not responding from wounds. You create better outcomes because you're operating from clarity instead of chaos. Your whole life elevates when your emotional state stabilizes. So I'm telling you right now, today can be the day everything changes. Not because your circumstances will change, not because difficult people will suddenly disappear, but because you decide that from this moment forward, you will never again hand over the remote control of your emotions to anyone. You decide that your peace is non-negotiable. You decide that regardless of what people do or say or think, you will remain anchored in who you are. This is your inheritance. This is your birthright. This is the life you were created to live. A life where you're not tossed by every wind, not shaken by every storm, not moved by every opinion. A life where you stand firm in your purpose, clear in your identity, and unshakable in your peace. The question is not whether this is possible. The question is whether you're willing to do what it takes to make it real. The power has always been yours. Now go and use it.